Hi, this is Kogito, and welcome to another Through the Ages video. Sorry for the long delay. I was kind of busy / I guess a little burnt out in video making, but I'm back. I'm excited to talk about my current Round 3 World Championship group, which has been very exciting. I won't give you any more spoilers than that. But before I start, I'd like to talk a little bit about my previous round, because I ended up not making videos on all of the games. And the main reason for that, as you can see, is that my last two-player games, my opponents both resigned in. Now there was still stuff to talk about in those games, but I figured that it wasn't really worth covering them. The group had already been decided by that point. I actually ended up doing a clean sweep of my group last round, which I was pretty happy with. But yeah, like I said, I just figured it wasn't much point discussing that. So good game to all of my opponents, even though it was this looks really lopsided. You know, some of the games were quite close. You can see even like this two-player game was close, other games were close. So, you know, I don't think the final result, indicates there are definitely some games that could have gone either way. But regardless, that's in the past. Let's discuss my third round group, which is certainly a doozy, because my moving to the third round, we get another seeded player. One of these 48 seeded players, and the seeded player that I'm actually going to be facing is Piata, who I will discuss, who I may as well discuss now, because they are the seeded player. So Piata, as you might know, used to be one of the main tournament organizers in the Through the Ages scene. I mean, I say used to be, it's not like he's retired or anything, it's just taking a break. Understandably, I only organize one tournament myself, and I can say it's more work than it might seem from the outside. But so Piata was, I know, the World Championship organizer, I believe also International Intermezzo for a very large number of years. On a break right now, still playing the game, still a very strong player, as we can see from the Greeka ratings, where Piata is a little bit ahead of me. I'm pretty close to him, actually, including the conservative rating, really close, only 4 points apart, but still, he is indeed the favorite in this group over me, and I think even more so, it looks like yeah, the last, okay, who knows, the last rating change was a while ago, so who knows what these ratings might look like now. The other two players in the group are lower rating, but still definitely nobody to take lightly. It's Delone Carter and Pepikos. Delone Carter is currently ranked 160. Pepikos, at least according to Gleeker rating, the underdog in the group at rating 547. But as we'll see from the games, both of them are also quite strong players in their own right, and nobody in this group is taken lightly. Even if Piata might be, theoretically my biggest competition according to Gleeker rating. Before we take a look at the first game, though, I think I'd like to discuss how each of my opponents has done, both in this year's World Championship and in last year's. I will start with last year's. And I'll go in alphabetical order, I think. So first is Delone Carter. Delone Carter in last year's World Championship, all three of them played. Delone Carter ended up sadly losing in stage 3. Delone Carter was in the upper bracket, but they ended up in 4th place, only by a little bit. But in round 3, when you end up 4th in the upper bracket, you do get eliminated. So unfortunately, this is where Delone Carter ended their run. But as you can see, this was like a relatively close group. And Delone Carter could have very easily continuing the tournament over Flutter, and who knows how far they could have gone if there have been a few changes in this group. So I'm sure Delone Carter, certainly doesn't want to end up 4th again in round 3 here. Next is Pepikos. Okay, I did Pepikos next because Pepikos, like Delone Carter, also lost in round 3. Pepikos was in the lower bracket, actually. They were in 2nd place, which in the lower bracket is enough to drop you from the tournament. Somewhat substantially behind Champ de Glace, but Pepikos at least has remained in the upper bracket until round 3 of this tournament, so they're already doing better than they did last year. Piata got much farther than them, and farther than I did last year too. I think I'm pretty sure I lost in stage 5. Yeah, so Piata lasted 1 round longer to stage 6. Was in the lower bracket and finished 2nd, somewhat substantially behind LCFYX, but still 2nd this late in the tournament. Obviously, a very good result. Finished ahead of Fientric, for example, who was one of the players who beat me in an earlier round. So yeah, definitely a strong result for Piata. As for this year, like I said, Piata is the seeded player in the group, so this is the first round Piata is playing in this year's World Championship. Delone Carter in round 1, unsurprisingly, finished first with a pretty substantial lead, 33 points. And in round 2, Delone Carter scored a bit less, but still a very good result at 29 points. So definitely a good first 2 rounds for Delone Carter. As for Pepikos, a bit worse in round 1, only 27 points, so only finished 5 points ahead of second place, so this was a pretty close group in round 1. Round 2 was even closer, Pepikos finishing only 3 points ahead of St. Amadeus, but, you know, even finishing 1 point ahead is enough to get into the upper bracket. So you could say that according to both Glico and the tournament results, which isn't surprising because Glico is based on, you know, tournament results, partly, in large part. Piata definitely seems like my strongest competition, followed by Delone Carter, with Pepikos perhaps being the biggest underdog in the group. But again, you know, especially, you know, at this stage in the World Championship, I think no player can be taken lightly. Anyone can win. And so without further ado, let's take a look at our first 4-player game. In this game I'm playing first, we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. In age 3, we can see there's 2 theater leaders, Chaplin and Fleming, along with Hollywood. No Marlena, though. There's a bunch of science leaders, Gates, Einstein, Steve Jobs, and Marie Curie. No real wonder payoff, though, except for Manhattan Project. No Gandhi with Manhattan Project, so wars might be quite important in age 3. In age 2, there's Railroad plus James Watt combo, but other than that, not really too many exciting wonders. There are a bunch of the culture leaders, though, Bach, Gotti, and Shakespeare, so maybe a culture play might be possible, even though that's usually pretty difficult in 4-player. There's Maria, but no ocean liner service, as mentioned previously. Notably, Red Cross is there, but also no ocean liner service. There's also no Bell to lead into some science leaders. Also Robespierre, always important to keep in mind. Age 2 governments become higher value with him. In age 1, the wonders are a bit better than age 2, but still not maybe the most exciting. Batch, Universalis, and Himeji, perhaps the best ones. The leaders, I usually like to see if they like to be elected early or late. I would say, though, there's not a very strong disposition among these leaders of being elected early and late. A lot of them are kind of fine being elected either, so that doesn't really affect too much your choice of age A leader. As for me, I think my major choice was between Confucius and Roman Roads as the 2 highest value cards available to me in this portion. I think a case can be made for Roman Roads as a strong wonder. However, I was concerned if I took Roman Roads, it felt to me that Confucius, Cleopatra, and Sun Tzu would probably all be taken by my opponents in some combination. And if that happened, then I wouldn't be left with any leaders to take except for 2 civil actions, and it would be Alexander or Caesar, neither of which, who are arguably the 2 worst AJ leaders, at least up there. And so I felt that going without a leader on turn 2 is pretty bad, whereas going without a wonder in turn 2 is okay. And also maybe Hanging Gardens is less likely to be taken than one of these leaders. So I felt that it was more important to get the guaranteed leader than the guaranteed wonder. With Confucius giving you extra science, you can also potentially skip an AJ wonder more easily. So that's why I went with Confucius. Pepikos takes Cleopatra and Roman Roads, pretty decent combo. Piata takes Richland and Stonehenge, chooses this combination over Sun Tzu Engineering Genius by itself. And Delone Carter decides to take Engineering Genius and Sun Tzu instead of Hanging Gardens, which I think makes sense. Age 1 begins. So after doing the typical things in turn 2, the question is what else to do, and I thought it was a pretty straightforward decision to take the Hanging Gardens. Maybe not the best AJ wonder, but I think it's pretty good. It definitely has some strengths, helping support you in the military and stuff like that. In addition, but moreover, these are very low value AJ yellow cards, so I just thought getting the Hanging Gardens was better than them. There's not really an AJ wonder I would have preferred more. Colosseum I think is about equally as strong as Hanging Gardens. Colossus is probably stronger, but there's no sewers in the game, and there's not a, there's definitely some military leaders in H1, no Barbarossa though notably, but yeah, overall I just felt that I preferred spending my civil action on Hanging Gardens than one of these cards. I drew a bonus card in Inhabited Territory. Because elects Cleo, and instead of building the mine, interestingly chooses to build 2 stages of the Roman roads and increase the population. I'm not sure I agree with this play, frankly. But it is, maybe Pepikos just really wants to finish the Roman roads as early as possible, guarantee that they can finish it next turn. Piata takes Alexander the Great. Alexem interestingly chooses Alexander over Caesar or Ashoka. Probably I would have taken Ashoka and Payada's position, but Alexander a little bit of anti-synergy with Stonehenge, because Alexander costs you an extra civil action, which you already have to pay, more than usual with Stonehenge. But I can also understand, maybe Ashoka is a bit of a anti-synergy with Stonehenge too, because you have to spend civil action taking cards in your hand and then building Stonehenge. And the Stonehenge can help you play out technologies that you take with Ashoka, and thus help you cycle through your hand easier. So yeah, maybe I also just like Ashoka more than the average person. Lone Carter, after doing, actually chooses not to elect Sun Tzu and instead just takes the Colosseum. This is also a pretty interesting play. It is true that Lone Carter, could have elected Sun Tzu and then maybe would have had one civil action left, and maybe they didn't want to take one of these yellow cards, so they just felt that they preferred spending 2 civil actions in the Colosseum than 1 civil action on one of these cards. Maybe guarantee they will get the Colosseum. They probably should be able to get it regardless. But I think it was mostly, I guess not wanting these yellow cards. But I still think, even though not electing Sun Tzu, maybe all it costs you is 2 military card draws, which isn't the end of the world. But still, those, those can be helpful military card draws. So definitely an interesting decision. I'm not saying it's necessarily the wrong one, just not something I would have thought of. But maybe I overvalue electing the leader in H2 a little too much. Anyway, I seed the card that's not a bonus card, and I reveal the development of crafts. And I make kind of an interesting play. This was a little bit of an awkward turn for me. Turn 3, I think, can oftentimes be a little awkward when you're playing first in 4-player, because the card row hasn't moved very much yet, so you often don't have that many good options. Now, I think the civil action efficient play for me would have been to build a lab, increase my population, and then build 1 stage of Hanging Gardens. That would have left me with 1 civil action left, with which I would have taken one of these yellow cards. The problem is, at that point, I would have already built my 3rd mine and my 2nd lab, meaning that the urban growth and the rich land, it's not clear that I would have a good chance to play them before H1 ends. Cultural Heritage, just kind of a civil action inefficient card. Now, maybe instead of building the lab, I could have instead, say, built 2 stages of Hanging Gardens, increase my population, and then taking the urban growth. That definitely would have been the civil action efficient play. Maybe it would have been the right one. My justification of taking the alchemy instead was that I can do that and then increase my population, get out of corruption, and set myself up to potentially next turn build an alchemy directly. So even though I am taking a card for 3 civil actions, which is very civil action and efficient, I'm kind of saving a civil action by not building the philosophy and instead building an alchemy directly. Of course, that also costs me 1 science from not building the lab this turn, but again, maybe my alternative play would have also been not to build this lab and instead build 2 stages and take in the urban growth. So in that sense, I'm kind of costing myself I'm basically spending 2 civil actions on this, and well, okay, I guess I am spending what I'm spending. Yeah, I'm spending 2 extra civil actions on this compared to taking the urban growth and also losing a rock in the balance. But the advantage is I know that I will have access to the alchemy next turn. In retrospect, I can definitely see the logic in this. Again, setting myself up to build an alchemy directly next turn, that's oftentimes very strong to do. But this is a pretty significant cost I'm doing it at. And so I think maybe in retrospect, I don't think this is a play I necessarily consider that highly, but like I said, building 2 stages, instead increasing my population and taking this urban growth might have been better in the end. There's a decent chance that the alchemy would have circled back to me next turn regardless. And even if it didn't, I could spend the urban growth on a philosophy and then just do other things. I could maybe, I would have 4 rocks. I would be able to finish the Hanging Gardens and build a philosophy with the urban growth A next turn, thus setting me up for potential H1 winners and stuff like that. So I think in retrospect that would have been better than taking this alchemy. I draw a Phalanx and another bonus card. Pepikos Seeds reveals the development of warfare. Pepikos finishes Roman roads, builds a mine, and increases the population. So they kind of just lost 1 rock by not building the mine next turn, but 1 rock this early on can definitely be highly impactful. Payada takes the development of warfare. Did Pepikos also took it. Payada builds the 2nd lab, as well as 2 stages of Stonehenge. Piata also just play Alexander immediately, which this turn gives them an extra food. Do the extra yellow token. Delone Carter offers open for this agreement. Sadly, not to me, but to Piata. Lex Sun Tzu now, and then chooses to build Siege the Coliseum. Can't build the lab because Delone Carter took the Development of Warfare. We can see Alexander immediately actually very useful for Piata, letting Piata both take Development of Warfare and build the second lab this turn. As for my turn, I had to choose between seeding 2 high-value cards. I mean, I could choose not to seed, but I think if you don't seed with Confucius, it's like, why even have Confucius, kind of. Especially, when we're still in the AJ deck. So I had to choose between seeding the bonus card and the Phalanx, and I ended up deciding that getting rid of my tactic would be too risky. It's pretty important, especially in a 4-player game, to have an Age 1 tactic in your hand available to you of some sort. So I decided to just see the bonus card. Reveal Development of Politics, drawing 2 more bonus cards in an uncertain borders, so I definitely made the right decision by seeing the bonus card. I choose to play out the Phalanx just because I'm planning on discarding the uncertain borders and the bonus card, and if I had to keep the Phalanx too, I would have had to discard another bonus card, which I didn't want to do. Doing it this way lets me keep 2 bonus cards in my hand. And with my remaining for civil actions, now unfortunately, my original plan to build an alchemy directly did have to be delayed because of the Development of Warfare that I chose to take. So instead, I have to just upgrade my philosophy to an alchemy. Still, not bad. Felt like a better use of my civil actions than taking one of these cards for expensive. Unfortunately, I'm playing at the Phalanx while leaving 2 knights in the row, which I didn't like to see, but again, I wanted to keep the bonus cards in my hand. I can get out of corruption by building 1 stage of the Hanging Gardens. I could then build another stage of the Hanging Gardens, but I actually thought that the urban growth might be more important. It should make it a lot easier for me to build an alchemy directly. For example, next turn I'll have 6 rocks. I can finish my Hanging Gardens to get down to 2 rocks with the food, and then with the happy faces. Right, so then I'll be at 2 rocks, and then with the urban growth, this means that any rock development that gets revealed will allow me to build an alchemy directly, even after finishing Hanging Gardens. And so that potential to make it a lot easier for me to build an alchemy directly next turn meant that, made me conclude that this urban growth was worth spending a civil action on. I draw new deposits. Pepiko's Seeds reveals Development of Market, so I won't be able to build an alchemy directly next turn at least. Pepiko's interestingly decides to take a second AJ Wonder, the Colossus. It's pretty rare to see someone take 2 AJ Wonders. To be honest, this is a potential play I have thought about. I feel that it might be underexplored because, like I said, almost no one does it. I mean, it's probably because AJ Wonders are typically, not the highest value one, so maybe you would rather do an Age 1 Wonder instead, but maybe in this case, I mean, Pepiko's is passing up taking a Knights for 2 civil actions, maybe a breakthrough, or building another second lab, so Pepiko's is certainly giving up a fair amount for the Colossus, but on the other hand, the Colossus will obviously help Pepiko's with both strength and colonization. I think this would have been even better, say if there was a Suez Canal in the deck, then maybe I would have said this is, like, perhaps clearly, maybe not clearly the right play, but I think a lot closer. I think maybe as is, Colossus isn't quite high value enough to justify doing this and interfering. Though it is, on the other hand, true that, like, as noted previously, the Age 1 Wonders aren't the best, and so that makes this kind of thing more appealing. It's definitely a very interesting line, and I don't mean that as an insult. I genuinely mean that as an interesting line. And plays a Fighting Band, putting them at 5 strength. Pepiko's finishes Stonehenge and takes a copy of Knights, then plays a Legion Tactic. Delone Carter Seeds reveals development of planning. The options are Science, Religion, and Settlement. Delone Carter chooses Settlement over Religion, which I think is the right play. I think Settlement is usually the strongest development in the AJ deck. Delone Carter finishes Coliseum, takes the second copy of Knights, and unfortunately, they're not too surprisingly. And then finally builds that second lab. It's my turn. I seed my new deposits, flipping the event deck, revealing development of trade routes. I decided it's pretty important to take the swordsman so that I'm not going to be weakest after my turn, since we're now since the event deck has now flipped for the first time. So I can build a swordsman directly to go up to 4 strength. And thanks to the development of trade routes, I'm able to then increase my population and finally get my second lab, building one directly. So it took a long time before this plan came to fruition, which again is maybe a sign that I shouldn't have taken that alchemy for 3 civil actions way back when, but at least I get the payoff now. I decided not to upgrade a warrior to swordsman because I wanted to draw a card another card to seed next turn with Confucius. That's not one of my bonus cards. I ended up drawing a developed territory. But because it's not seed, instead takes the Ziska for 2 civil actions. Definitely a strong leader. However, it does mean that after building the lab, Pepikos is still not out of corruption, which is pretty bad. Potentially that means that, say, Isabella with the blue cubes might have been a better leader to take, or perhaps Pepikos could have delayed the leader and instead increased the population to get out of corruption. Again, Ziska is certainly a strong leader, so I understand valuing him highly, but I wonder if maybe the corruption makes this too high a price. Piata does not see it, instead builds the knights, copies my phalanx tactic, unfortunately, to go up to 7 strength, making them the strongest, and then they grab a rich land and an irrigation to get some upgrades in, potentially next turn. So Lone Cutter also doesn't seed, instead plays a medieval army tactic that they're then able to build a knight for to also go up to 7 strength, and then they take an iron for 2 civil actions as well as reserves. Doesn't have a lot of science income, so I think it's right not to take another tech and instead a yellow card they can play. It's my turn. Even though I'm weakest, I do risk seeding for the Confucius bonus, and I get rewarded by revealing a Confucius event. And this was a difficult turn for me in that I basically had to decide whether or not it was worth it to take Isabella. There are definitely some considerations that make Isabella better, perhaps, than she normally is. First of all, I know there's a new deposits in this deck. Second of all, I know there's at least 2 colonies in this deck. I mean, I guess those are the major reasons. The current event deck is extremely favorable towards Isabella. However, the major reason I decided to go ahead and take Isabella now, I mean, there are still some other leaders, probably not... Michelangelo pairs, decently well with Hanging Gardens. I wouldn't have taken him for 2 civil actions, though. I could have, finished Hanging Gardens and taken Himeji Castle, though, for example. That was definitely a play I considered. But at the end of the day, the reason why I chose Isabella instead of waiting for, Joan or Leonardo, for example, was because by electing her this turn, I'm able to get an extra science from Confucius leaving play, which will leave me with just enough science after the Confucius event to play Monarchy. And Monarchy, I felt, gave me enough of a big boost at this point in the game that was worth it to take Isabella and elect her now, especially, like I said, because the event deck is currently so favorable to her. That leaves me with one final civil action, and, I think the most natural thing to do with it might be to build another stage in the Hanging Gardens, but I actually felt that, after one benefit of getting the Monarchy this turn with the 3rd military action is it means I can both adopt Piata's Legion tactic, as well as upgrade a warrior to a swordsman, thus putting me at 7 strength and tying me at strength with Piata and Delone Carter. That felt pretty important to me, and again, I can only do that with Monarchy. Anyway, I now have 1 civil action left, and it definitely could be, and I think building one stage of the Hanging Gardens would definitely be a good play, but I thought the drama might actually be a quite good card for me, and there's a specific reason for this. Currently on the road, there's Himeji Castle and Universitas, but all of my opponents have an open wonder slot, so I thought that it was very likely that both of these wonders would be gone before my next turn. However, I know that not only do I have an extra rock income with Isabella, but I also know that New Deposits is coming. And because of that, I felt that I might be in need of an Age 1 Wonder this game as a rock sink, because I'm going to have a fair amount of rock income even without Iron Mines. And so looking at the remaining wonders left, Machu Picchu, I think, yeah, I'm not getting irrigation, I might not even get iron, so Machu Picchu was kind of out for me, meaning if I do want an H1 wonder, it's going to have to be St. Peter's Basilica, which I think is a pretty good wonder for me. I won't, need it for age 1 because of the Hanging Gardens, but it does pair pretty well with the Hanging Gardens, giving me a total of 4 happy faces with just those 2 wonders. That will let me subsist for a long time into my yellow bank without putting any population into happy face buildings, which is very nice. But since I was planning on getting the St. Peter's Basilica, I thought the drama obviously pairs quite well with the St. Peter's Basilica. I might not need it for happy faces immediately, again because of Hanging Gardens, but especially, say, if a Ravages of Time gets revealed at some point, I might still need a happy face solution. And there's also a fair amount of drama synergy. There's Bach, Gotti, and Shakespeare for them age 2, and again Hollywood and the 2 age 3 theater leaders. So because of all those considerations, I felt that the drama was a reasonable card to take for just 1 civil action. I might not end up playing it, but I thought that with me having the monarchy, spending 1 civil action, just in case it ends up being a useful card, felt worth it to me. I picked this drama, not this one, because by picking this drama, I at least give myself an outside chance of taking Universitas next turn in case none of my opponents take it. Unlikely, probably, but I felt that it was possible. And I didn't think there was a particular reason for me to want to move the card row more by taking this copy of drama. Puppygus does not see Puppygus decides actually to take an age third wonder now in age 1, and chooses Himeji Castle over Universitas as well. But as a cost to this, Puppygus is not able to get out of corruption. It looks like Puppygus was not. No, Puppygus could have gotten out of corruption, yeah, with increasing the population. So Puppygus ends up taking corruption again to make this play, as this engineering genius is kind of only a 1-rock engineering genius. I do think taking corruption, once can be the right play, not the end of the world, but taking corruption multiple turns like this, especially early in the game when rocks are at a premium, I think is almost always the wrong choice, in my opinion. Piata Seeds reveals rats, at least. I am hit by it the least out of all of my opponents. I do think Hanging Gardens, maybe counterintuitively, is actually really good for rats because it lets you control your food level a lot better. Anyway, Piata decides to take Michelangelo. Definitely pretty good synergy with Stonehenge, and Piata is also able to use him immediately to get this Universitas for 1 less civil action. And Piata just needed a replacement leader, so I think that makes sense. Piata builds another knight to become strongest, and takes warfare to help with their strength even more. Interestingly, values the warfare over alchemy. Their plan was probably to get irons with Michelangelo. Dylan Carter Seeds reveals an inhabited territory. Now, I only bid 3 on this. And I'll confess, I took a look over this game before I started recording, and I was trying to figure out. I played this game a while ago, almost a month ago. It finished almost a month ago, and I unfortunately can't remember why I only bid 3 on it. I was thinking maybe it was because I was worried about being vulnerable to potential aggression, or something like that, but especially because we can see the St. Peter's Basilica is on the row, so I do want to spend 4 rocks finishing the Hanging Gardens this turn so that I can take St. Peter's Basilica. So I think that was maybe my reason. I was like, well, I only have access to 4 rocks, and so maybe if I bid too much in the colony, then I will be at risk of an aggression. So I think that's the kind of thing I was worried about, but I actually went back and calculated, and I'm pretty sure I could have bid at least 4 while still being relatively safe from an aggression. I'm not sure if I might have had another reason for that. It's definitely, a pretty strong colony that I do feel that I should have probably bid at least 1 more on. But regardless, Dylan Carter ends up winning it. Is able to rebuild both knights to go up to 11 strength. Plays iron and then takes a rich land and an alchemy. The rich land will enable them to upgrade 2 mines next turn, and the alchemy will enable further upgrades down the line. I can't see it. Instead, like I said, my plan was to finish the Hanging Gardens. I decided to do it with the Masonry. I felt that with my alchemies and having Confucius earlier, I felt that I had enough science that I had the leeway to get Masonry, and it's also obviously makes the dramas better. So it felt worth it to me. And with my remaining 2 civil actions, I can take St. Peter's Basilica, so that's a pretty clean turn. I can also build a swordsman directly to go up to 9 strength to at least not be weakest, tied with Pajada. I think I can even, yeah, I even upgrade another swordsman to be ahead of Pajada in strength. Unfortunately, I'm not strongest, but I'm at least 2nd strongest. I draw Pestilence. Pupikos offers an evil trade agreement to Pajada to get up to 2 colonization bonus. Finishes Yumeji Castle to finally get out of corruption. And then actually plays a cartography to get even more colonization bonus. So Pepikos has clearly ceded some colonies, which makes me, happier. On one sense, I'm happier. This makes me happier for Isabella because there's more colonies coming. But on the other hand, facing someone with 4 colonization bonus might make it is obviously going to make it a lot harder for me to win any colonies against Pepikos. But Pepikos will also have to be careful to bid too much to be vulnerable to aggressions and stuff. So I should be able to get at least 1 or 2. Pair that plays Warfare, 1 stage of the Universitas, upgrades 1 farm, doesn't upgrade the 2nd, so that they'll have 7 rocks next turn, which will be enough to finish Universitas. Jolene Carter Seeds reveals Raiders. Thankfully, it doesn't not hit me. Jolene Carter upgrades 1 mine, takes Leonardo, good leader. Interestingly, plays a 2nd medieval army tactic. I guess just because they had the military actions, so they just felt like they might as well. Actually, I guess that makes it, yeah, because now they're and I think, no, it doesn't make it take any longer, because even the previous medieval army tactics still would have had to wait a turn to become public, I think, after getting rid of Sun Tzu. So I think this is basically just for fun, which is, legitimate. It's my turn. I don't see Pestilence because, as we can see, I'm going to have all my population held up in places. So I didn't know when I would have a free population, so I felt that this was a negative event for me. And specifically what I do is I build a knight. I think it can be very dangerous to be, when Sun Tzu upgraded the knight tactic, to be, if you're the one player without knights, that can be pretty dangerous. So I didn't want to be in this position, even though I'm heavily invested in swordsmen already. I can still be in knights, and I can then copy the medieval army tactic later, and then maybe win a colony with one of my swordsmen or something, and then eventually get a 2nd or even a 3rd army going, and really start competing in strength with this upgraded tactic. That all made me feel that it was worth it to invest into these knights. That leaves me with 2 civil actions left. I didn't want the warfare, and then I will have with 1 last civil action anyway, so decided to take the breakthrough. Even though I had a fair amount of science, I've now used a fair amount of it up with all of these sort of extra texts that I've played. So I just thought that the breakthrough is gonna, generally a good card, even when you already have a lot of science. It's hard to have too much science. And I also felt that it was better than the frugality because it wasn't clear when I'd be able to use the frugality. I draw a historic territory and a kidnap. Pepikos Seeds reveals a strategic territory. I'm willing to bid more on this one, but unfortunately it's not enough to beat Pepikos' 4 colonization bonus, so they're able to win it with just 1 warrior, which is pretty good. Pepikos plays a Code of Laws, and then takes a swordsman and a frugality. Unfortunately, Pepikos is able to get out of corruption by rebuilding the warrior. Maybe playing the swordsman, perhaps would have been better, although I guess Pepikos didn't need it to be up to compete at strength on a decent level. So, fine turn, seems like. Age 2 begins. Piata cancels the Naval Trade Agreement Pact, decides they don't need the tokens anymore, finishes Universitas, and then takes the 2nd copy of Iron. Delon Carter got the 1st copy, and the next 2 copies were extremely late, notably. Delon Carter Seeds finally reveals my new deposits. Luckily, because the irons were so late, I actually end up tying for the most amount of rocks I get achieved from this new deposits. Delon Carter finishes upgrading their mines and then upgrades Lab 2. Yeah, makes sense. Now with turn passed into H2, we can take a quick look at the overall situation. In terms of culture, I am sort of tied for last with Delone Carter, with Puppicus and Piata getting more, but it's, you know, pretty close. Can't pay too much attention to culture at this stage in the game. As for science, it looks like, yeah, I'm tied with most players here have a decent science income, either from alchemies or from wonders. Currently, Delone Carter has the most rock income. I'm second with 4, thanks to Isabella. The other 2 players have 3 rock income. My food, I'm not getting any food income, although that's partly because I already, got all my population out with the Hanging Gardens. Strength, my strength situation, though, is, I think, looking the best out of all my players, because I have a relatively clear route to getting a fair amount more strength by getting more upgraded medieval army tactics going. I'm the only player with both swordsmen and knights, so at least over the next few turns, my strength situation is looking good. Maybe after that, I might struggle a little bit if I don't get any H2 military techs, but for the time being, my strength looks good. And I also tied with Puppicus with 5 civil actions. So the game is looking quite close right now. With no player, I think, having a particularly strong advantage in the area, except maybe Delone Carter with rock income. But yeah, definitely a pretty close game overall, so we'll see how H2 goes. With me being strongest on my turn, I decided to go ahead and see the historic territory. I might even be able to win it. And I'm rewarded by revealing a border conflict while I'm strongest, giving me an extra 3 rocks. I decide that the best use of these to get out of corruption is to go ahead and finish the St. Peter's Basilica. Right now it's only really giving me culture, but, later it'll give me more and, open up my window slot. And again, I think it's the only real way to spend my resources this turn, since I don't have the science save for iron. But after finishing it, now I'm basically faced with the choice of, do I want to take this copy of iron? And there's definitely a case too. I could, for example, take both iron and richland. With the richland, I will be able to upgrade all 3 iron mines, which, even though it's into H2, getting all 3 upgraded at once on the second turn of H2 isn't too late. So I think that's definitely a defensible line. But I actually decided, after adapting the medieval army tactic, to take the Could Have Lost instead. I think I was kind of thinking, there's not necessarily a need to take this iron for 2 civil actions. Piata and Delone Carter already have it, so the only other player who would potentially take it would be Puppicus, who would have to pay, keep it on 2 civil actions for Puppicus, which I thought would be a somewhat substantial cost, because they're also faced with corruption issues right now. Maybe Puppicus would prefer the alchemy for 1 civil action, for example. With the Code of Laws, I thought that Delone Carter and Piata, especially Piata, could potentially get the Code of Laws, especially with Monarchy. Code of Laws is a very useful tech to make sure that to make it a lot easier to just live off of Monarchy, at least into Age 3, and, the middle of Age 3 or so. So I just thought that the Code of Laws was going to be a more contested tech than the iron, and even if I don't get the iron, I could just wait for coal instead, which should be fine. So I think that was my logic, and I do think it applies. Probably the Code of Laws is more contested than the iron, so I think this is a fine play. Richland is helpful for both iron and coal. I don't really have a better use for that last civil action. This got the Kidnap, draw an autonomous territory, definitely a high value card. Sadly no Suez in the game. Puppicus Siege reveals a Reign of Terror, thankfully doesn't hit me, because I'm strongest. Puppicus decides to take Robespierre immediately. Definitely a very high value card, especially for Puppicus, with Puppicus still being on despotism and not having much science income. So definitely a very valuable card for Puppicus, but does come as a substantial cost, not only in civil actions, but also in yet more corruption. Puppicus, I think this is like the 3rd or 4th turn Puppicus has been in corruption this game. Piata takes Machu Picchu, definitely a high value wonder with Michelangelo to enable you to build more wonders. And then after upgrading an iron mine, adopting that upgraded medieval army tactic, Piata decides, instead of upgrading the second iron mine, to increase the population, presumably to give them exactly 9 rocks so they can finish the Machu Picchu next turn. Notably, Piata lost a farm to the Reign of Terror, which I think makes sense. Piata needs these units in military, and that's probably another reason why Piata is valuing this Machu Picchu so much, to make it a lot easier to live off of just this one irrigation. The Lone Carter takes Republic, increase the population. Interestingly, decides to play the bread and circuses instead of upgrading the second lab. I'm not sure why, honestly. I decided to go and cede my autonomous territory, even with Picos having three colonization bonus. I thought that I should have time to prepare for it. If it is revealed why I have Isabella, I will at least be able to decently compete for it. And I also just, want to cede on my turn while I'm, at least second strongest. And I reveal my developed territory, which I am willing to put a decent amount into. Just as a territory to win. I could kind of use science. Anyway, I do end up winning it for 5, which I can play, a somewhat substantial amount. I decide to keep the bonus card because for future colonies, potentially, I thought that it was more valuable than the 2 rocks. I don't have that much, obviously, to spend the rocks on. I mean, I guess iron upgrades. But as we can see, I'm actually not going to do iron upgrades because in order to compensate for me winning this colony and not being able to immediately rebuild the unit, I decided to go ahead and take in place strategy. This is why I was willing to bid on the colony in the first place, was because I got this option to play strategy, which is obviously a high value card. Now, the problem is, after playing strategy, and another thing that I want to do is take this copy of reserves, because the reserves will enable me to increase my population. The plan was to use it for food to increase my population next turn to get a second army. So I do think with this play I'm doing with the colony, the reserves is a very important card to allow me to compete more in strength. Strategy is also an important card to let me compete in strength. But the cost of doing all these things is it means I'm not taking this iron for one civil actions, and I'm not doing iron upgrades and stuff, which is definitely a pretty substantial cost, because it puts me at a fair amount of risk. Pepicos, also might not have the iron, and so if a copy of coal gets revealed, for example, maybe Pepicos will take it, maybe I'll be without any mine upgrades for a long time. So definitely a risky play. I do think it's probably the right play to do, given that I bid for the developed territory, but maybe the fact that I had to do this means that I shouldn't have bid for the developed territory, and instead should have just gone for the iron play. I think maybe even going back a ways, I'm being kind of punished for not bidding on that inhabited territory earlier. I kind of just wanted one colony, but the inhabited probably would have been better than the developed, and then I would have been able, and then I wouldn't have been in this situation where I'm doing this, taking strategy for 3 civil actions. Yes, it's a strong card, but it's still 3 civil actions. Taking the reserves, which is another inefficient card. I'm definitely being pretty civil action inefficient in those games so far, which is not someplace you want to be. And I, like I said, doing this risk with the mine upgrades. So I think I think given that I bid for the colony, I think this turn makes sense, but I think I just kind of approached the colony game in the wrong way, and as a result, ended up doing these inefficient plays. Anyway, I drew a strategic territory, a historic territory, and a national pride. Pepicos is revealing knowledge of the ancients, and unfortunately, while we can see Pepicos is able to do a Robespierre revolution with the Kanman, and then takes that copy of coal that was indeed revealed during Pepicos' turn. After the Robespierre revolution, Pepicos will still have 7 science next turn to enable them to get coal upgrades going. So I do think this is a good play from Pepicos, but it's definitely a punishing play for me, because it means that I won't get this copy of coal, and who knows when the second copy will be on the row. And Pepicos is actually also able to get out of corruption this turn by building a temple. So certainly a very strong turn for Pepicos, improves their position quite a bit. Piata Seas reveals Barbarians. Unfortunately, Pepicos is hit by this card. But takes the Architecture, good card with Michelangelo, and can now finish that Machu Picchu. With 1 civil action to spare to take an opera, presumably planning on Bach, maybe eyeing Shakespeare too. Dylan Carter takes the selective breeding and does 2 upgrades. Sensible turn. It's my turn. I want to seed while I'm strongest. I decide to seed the National Pride as a more or less neutral event. Even if someone else wins the National Pride, I still get the 2 culture from seeding it, so it's not too bad. And I reveal Dark Ages, which does, cost me more than my opponents. Kind of, ruins a lot of the advantage that I got from winning the developed territory. So the developed territory definitely ended up being not a particularly exciting territory for me this game. I think cost me a fair amount for not that much benefit, perhaps. Anyway, I decide to go ahead and go with my original plan to play reserves for food to get a second knight. So I think that is good. Puts me actually up to 19 strength. So I'm now looking at least to a little bit threatening to my opponents, perhaps, although they all have a fair amount of military actions, but at least probably guarantees that I'll be strongest for the next turn cycle. I do at least still have enough science to put my could have laws. I didn't see a better use for that science right now. That leaves me with 3 civil actions left. And there are some options with it. Statue of Liberty, perhaps is one option. Maybe Gaudi, although it's kind of hard to see how I can get a good Gaudi going with me not having any open population. My next open population is probably going to go into Knights. Speaking of population of Knights, I decided to take this reserves for 2 civil actions, spending 3 civil actions to take and play reserves. That's definitely a fair amount, but I think given that this reserves will represent a 3rd army for me next turn, it felt worth it. That leaves me with 1 civil action left. And I think that's pretty clear urban growth with my St. Peter's Basilica. Probably won't need the sacrifice buildings. I already have the drama. I don't need the opera. Gaudi, like I said previously, doesn't look like he'll be a very good leader for me because I don't have that much open population. I don't need like theaters or arenas. So I don't need religions or arenas. So even though there's no immediately obvious use for my urban growth over the next few turns, it just felt like basically the best of bad options after I committed to taking this reserves. I draw Plunder and Infiltrate into Refugees. Papikos takes 2 efficient upgrades and actually basically just takes a bunch of cards. Unfortunately, that Dark Ages did hit Papikos pretty severely, rendering Papikos unable to do cool upgrades this turn. So not only does it cost them rocks from not getting cool upgrades a turn earlier, but it also costs them yet another turn of corruption, unfortunately. PLCs reveals a vast territory. I'm willing to put, I forget exactly how much I bid onto this, but I was able to win it in the end. Only for 1 army, actually, which definitely felt worth it to me, even though it did cost me my strength advantage this turn. And meant that I didn't need to take the reserves after all, but I didn't have knowledge of the vast territory, so. Piata takes and plays Justice System to get their 5th civil action. Are then able to take a railroad, another good wonder with Michelangelo. Piata is definitely getting a good Michelangelo game going this game. And they take a Rifleman high value card. Dylan Carter does a Republic Revolution, definitely improves the position a lot. Does cost them corruption, unfortunately, but Dylan Carter, it is true the card roy doesn't look particularly exciting for Dylan Carter anyway, so I think this is probably the right move. I go ahead and seed my Pestilence, because now that I've won the vast territory, I thought that it was gonna be very likely that I would be able to have a free population for the Pestilence, and because most of the cards seeded in this event are probably going to be H2 events, I should also have more control over when that Pestilence comes out. Anyway, I reveal my historic territory. I forgot how much I bid on it, but as you can see, I am the only player bid on it, which is kind of funny. It's, pairs well with the St. Peter's Basilica as well, and now I have way more happy faces than I need, I suppose. But, still nice to have. And I felt comfortable bidding it because I am able still to rebuild one of my armies, putting me at strongest anyway, so that felt good. The rest of my turn after this is a little interesting, though, because I basically spent a long time thinking of if I wanted to take Bach here. Bach is one of the reasons why I took Jama in the first place. Obviously, would be a good leader with Jama. With my vast territory, I should also have a fair amount of population to play with him. However, the problem with Bach is I felt that it was more important for me to get this farm upgrade going earlier. And after doing that, I now am one civil action short of taking Bach. Or Kremlin. Kremlin is another card that I consider playing because it pairs because I have so many happy faces. Obviously, it would be strong, but I thought that I might struggle to be able to afford the rock requirement for Kremlin. And so instead of my last civil action, I just took this Frugality, which is also a good card. I do think taking Bach and just then taking Selective Breeding in my hand and not upgrading it this turn would have been defensible. Now, one issue with that, though, is that I know that there's an autonomous territory coming in the deck. And so, because I definitely want to try to bid a fair amount for the autonomous territory, not upgrading the farms this turn would have made it a lot harder to do that. Because then it would have been a lot harder for me to get more population to replace the units I would lose to the autonomous. So I think that was sort of what tipped me over into thinking that the farm upgrade this turn was too important, which means that I can't take Box, so I might as well just take Frugality. Discard my Infiltrate, draw a Freedom of Movement, a bonus card, and a Promise of Military Protection. Pepicos is finally able to get coal upgrades. Is actually able, at least I'm able to upgrade all 3 coal mines this turn. That's pretty good. And then they take a cannon for 3 civil actions. Piata is able to finish the railroad this turn, giving them another nice boost. Is able to be at 8 resource production despite only having 1 mine upgraded notably, and is able to take that Kremlin that I didn't take. So Piata is able to get a lot of wonders with Michelangelo. And then decides to take the Bach, also that I didn't take, pairing with the opera that they have. And builds a Knights to now become strongest. Dylan Carter offers the international trade agreement, sadly not to me. Dylan Carter increased the population 3 times, finally upgrades their lab, builds another warrior to fill an army, and builds an arena. All of this enables them to get out of corruption nicely, and then they just take a cavalryman and a breakthrough. So my turn, I decide to seed the refugees. I thought there was a good chance I would be able to win it. And I reveal a developed territory, which I did not seed. So this was a difficult choice for me because obviously I've seeded the autonomous territory, and it's probably unlikely that I'd be able to win both this and the autonomous territory. So I had to decide whether I want to strive for this or not. And the reason I did in the end was because, as we'll see, this turn I ended up deciding to replace my leader. And so I felt that developed territory will not developed territory 2, while not as strong as the autonomous territory, is I think the second strongest colony in the game. And given that I can win it while I have Isabella to get Isabella's rocks towards it, I felt better. It obviously also is revealed during my turn. If autonomous territory is revealed, say during Pepicos' or Piata's turn, I might not be able to bid so much into it out of fear of suffering and aggression. So for those reasons, I decided to go ahead and get the developed territory. I'm able to win it with an army, a bonus card, and my last age 1 bonus card, and 3 rocks from Isabella. A pretty substantial cost, but it is a very powerful territory. We can see I have a bunch of my yellow bank. Now, I will say, though, there is some anti-synergy with how I played this game, because I ended up winning a whole bunch of yellow token colonies, right? However, I also have a whole bunch of happy faces. So it's kind of like, yeah, I have this very nice looking yellow bank, but one of the advantages of having a lot of yellow tokens is then you need fewer happy faces, but I already have a ton of happy faces from my wonders. So having all these happy faces from my wonders means that my getting this yellow bank, while definitely still nice, don't get me wrong, is not as viable as it otherwise is, and makes, the cost of winning this, makes the benefit of winning the colonies versus the cost of, putting the units into it less strong. So I think that's not something I considered during the game, but it's definitely something I'm looking at now, that where this yellow bank, due to all the free happy faces I have, less valuable than it normally is. Anyway, with the reserves for rocks, I am able to at least rebuild my army to compete in strength a bit better. Okay. Now I have to decide, the age is probably going to end before my next turn, so I want to replace Isabella now. The question is, do I want, which leader do I want? And I think all 3 leaders can be justified. Nobel, I think, is just the overall most consistent one, giving me a strength advantage, which, you know, strength is close enough now. This 2 strength can definitely help. The science obviously can also help a lot. We saw previously there are a number of good lab leaders in this deck that can potentially pair well with Nobel. So there are a lot of strong arguments for Nobel. However, I think there's also a lot of strong arguments. Well, for Watt, obviously, Watt would enable me to maybe get these calls in next turn. I probably wouldn't take Watt this turn. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't. I would wait and take him next turn, but I could certainly wait for Watt instead for coal upgrades and maybe even oil upgrades if there's an early oil that's revealed. I think Shakespeare is also a very defensible leader. Now, a 1 copy of journalism is gone, but there is another in the deck. Now, if I take Shakespeare, maybe one of my opponents would cut the journalism, but maybe not. It's not clear that it would be a super valuable card for any of my opponents. I mean, Piata already is probably going to want to build operas with Bach. Pepicus doesn't really have the free population. Dylan Carter maybe could build a journalism, has the rocks for it perhaps, but maybe Dylan Carter would prefer putting the resources into other things. So I could certainly take Shakespeare with maybe a reasonable expectation that I would be able to get the 2nd copy of journalism. And I definitely have enough yellow tokens to be able to afford Shakespeare even in this 4-player game. Although he would still be a little risky, as Shakespeare inherently is in 4-player. What I think definitely would be the right choice if I was planning on going for coals. However, I think it was around this time I watched a Weidenbaum video where he mentioned that A440, who's the current reigning world champion, has a playstyle where he often just stays on bronze mines the whole game. And basically I had sort of that rattling around in my mind and thinking that this looks like a pretty good game to potentially try to survive off of bronze mines because the 2nd copy of coal is so late. So maybe I just shouldn't worry about mine upgrades at all and just live off of bronze mines. That being said, I think that in retrospect, there are things about my position that make it harder just to live off of bronze mines. And I guess I might as well say that here. First of all, obviously I won all these colonies, some of them with Isabella rocks. So, you know, winning colonies inherently costs rocks. And so when you're already at sort of when rocks are already at a premium for you because you aren't upgrading your mines, getting so many colonies becomes much more costly because rocks are at a premium. That wasn't something I had considered. Another thing I hadn't considered is that I have not gotten any H2 military techs. I'm only on swordsmen and knights right now. There are 2 copies of cannons left, and you know there's still H2 military techs left. I mean, you know, they just weren't very many revealed so far, and you know they were like either my opponents took them before I could. Maybe there's one that was only for 3 civil actions or something like that. But anyway, the point is, with me not knowing whether I'll have any H2 military techs, that means that I might have to depend on H3 military techs. And H3 military techs, obviously powerful, but they're extremely rock intensive, again. And so combine all the colonies I won with my potential need to rely on H3 military techs, I'm actually going to be pretty pressed for rocks this game, potentially. And with that being the case, that makes, I think, being able to survive just off of bronze mines and yellow cards a much dicier proposition. But all of that, I'm speaking in retrospect. At the time, I wasn't really thinking along those lines. I was thinking I'll just try surviving off of bronze mines. I think I didn't take Shakespeare, partly because it's 4-player, and partly because I didn't want to risk an opponent cutting journalism, so I just took Nobel. And then a patriotism just seemed among these yellow cards the most likely to be useful. And again, with my current plan being survive off of bronze mines, I felt that any rock yellow card I can get my hands on could be quite valuable. And this card, yeah, that's one of my colonies. I draw a bonus card of prosperity in inhabited territory. But because these reveals, unfortunately, an economic progress, which is not good for me. Pepicus gets selective breeding, revolutionary idea, frugality, you know, has to take a lot of yellow cards because they don't have much science, and then preemptively upgrades a temple. Perhaps this is a signal that there are happy face events in the deck, or maybe Pepicus is just playing around that possibility. Piata Stage reveals my autonomous territory. I bid some amount for it, but it's not going to be enough. Delone Carter ends up winning it. At least it costs 3 units and 3 bonus cards, so that's a pretty substantial amount. Piata finishes Kremlin, elects Bach, takes Cannon, takes Reserves, takes Scientific Method. Age 3 begins. Dylan Carter is the one who takes Watt. Watt is the last Age 2 leader on the row, so Dylan Carter doesn't have a choice. At the very least, Watt will represent 3 culture. So basically 3 culture for 1 civil action, which isn't the worst deal. Also takes the second copy of Rifleman, important tech. Builds 2 Riflemen to go up to 18 strength, and another Knight to go up to 23 strength, becoming the strongest. Takes an Engineering Genius and a Cannon, so Dylan Carter now has all 3 H2 military techs. And at this point, we can take a look at the overall situation at the beginning of Age 3. Cultural situation, me, Pepikos, and Piata are all roughly balanced, with Dylan Carter falling behind. Not by that much, though. Looks like, by about, 30 or less than 30 points, which is definitely very much possible to make up. As for science, I'm currently doing the best, partly due to Nobel. Pepikos is doing the worst. Pepikos is doing the best in rocks, though Piata isn't far behind. Rock production is definitely my biggest weakness. As I said, my plan in this game was just to not upgrade mines at all. Thanks to the colonies I won, my population situation and Yellow Bank situation is at least looking good, though. We can see Piata has all these wonders to get some value off of, though Piata will need to work out the happy face situation. As for civil and military actions, it looks like Dylan Carter is in the best situation there, although it's not a huge gigantic difference. I mean, I'm tied with Piata with 6 civil actions, so doing decently there. I would say, again, it's not... I don't think any player has a clear advantage going into Age 3. More or less in any regard. I think everyone kind of has strengths and weaknesses to their position. Probably Pepikos is worst off, just because Pepikos is the weakest, and looks like they might struggle to get enough population to compete into military to compete in strength. So, and for that reason, because Pepikos is suffering in strength, Pepikos might be in the weakest position. But I think the other 3 players all have things they can build off of. So this should be an exciting Age 3. I seed the prosperity because I have so many happy faces, revealing the national pride that I seeded that helps out Pepikos. After putting another army to become strongest, I decide to go and I take the Air Forces. Obviously, very important card, as I think we all know. As I take a breakthrough to help me out with science more. I think I especially wanted this because I was planning on getting an H3 government. So even though I have a lot of science, because I'm going to be spending a lot on H3 government, I thought this breakthrough would still be quite useful for me. We can see the journalism did end up being available for me, so Shakespeare could have been a potential option for me, although again it would have been risky. Instead, I just put my last civil action, increasing my population, get rid of events that I felt unlikely to seed. Maybe I could have gotten rid of promise of military protection as well, but I thought that there was a chance that I could offer that to someone to get even more strength and threaten my opponents with aggressions or something. Draw an impact of strength, an impact of wonders, and a plunder. Because plays revolutionary idea, builds a cannon to compete in strength better, also takes a cavalryman, so we can see that indeed I do end up not having any Age 2 military technologies whatsoever. Maybe I should have been more proactive in taking one of them, but I felt that I kind of always had more important things to do, I guess. Anyway, Pepikos plays defensive army. Unfortunately, they're in corruption yet again. Piata builds an opera, and then takes chaplain, so they don't have to build another opera anytime soon. Well, I guess they might have to for Happy Faces. Then they take a Republic, and then upgrades to Rifleman. Piata is actually still in despotism, notably. Dylan Carter Seeds reveals my pestilence that I was able to prepare for last turn. This costs Dylan Carter warrior, so at least it costs Dylan Carter, a somewhat, some resources. Anyway, they rebuild a Rifleman to go to 25 strength, and unfortunately Dylan Carter is able to get their hands on the Manhattan Project, which I think is a very strong wonder in this current game state. builds 2 stages and then takes that copy of journalism. I guess they felt that there wasn't a better card to take. Didn't need these texts with these texts, so. I seed my freedom of movement. I think I was planning to use it on this farm actually, because with my huge amount of yellow tokens, you know, I felt it was probably going to be unlikely that I would have the leeway, that I would have the need to upgrade another farm. I reveal cultural influence, which is third best for me and really helpful for Piata. Piata getting a lot of culture, you know. Probably that was seeded by Piata, who made sure to get a lot of culture production with Chaplain before it was revealed. Anyway, I thought the fundamentalism was a good tech for me here. I drew this impact of strength, and I was kind of feeling that, you know, I don't have access right now to any ways to push culture, so maybe military would be my most likely path to winning this game. Fundamentalism should help me out a lot with that, especially since it gives me an extra 6 strength without any cost in rocks. So I went and played it now. I then took the revolutionary idea just as a high-value yellow card, and also to help compensate for the science loss of fundamentalism. And it also lets me take all 3 of these Age 3 military techs, which not ideal, perhaps because of my rock situation, but certainly better than nothing. It doesn't mean I'm not taking this patriotism for 3 civil actions, but that felt like a high civil action cost for it. So this leaves me prepared for any Age 3 military... any H3 tactic that I might draw. And I do end up drawing one in the mechanized army. Maybe not the one I would have preferred with me already having 3 swordsmen, but at least it does something. I also at least draw a war, something that I can work towards, as well as an impact of progress, which should at least be a decently good impact for me. But because Pops takes air forces might be difficult, but because to afford the air forces, maybe this is mainly a denial. Or just to make sure, because has access to it, maybe they have some hopes that they can play it with this revolutionary idea. Anyway, they are able to get 2 armies going at the cost of destroying a lab, but at least this makes Pepiko strongest now. Piata takes patriotism and revolutionary idea, and then plays reserves to get it out of their hands so they can take a mechanized agriculture. Probably looking to, again, just survive better off of 1 farm with it. Although mechanized agriculture only represents an extra +1 food income compared to this Machu Picchu irrigation. So maybe it's not that good. Maybe they have thoughts of building a mechanized agriculture directly, though, and just keeping this around. And with the riflemen to gain strength more. Delone Carter takes oil, you know, obviously with James Watt and the computers. So 2 powerful H3 buildings. And then after upgrading computers, finishes the Manhattan Project and now becomes strongest. You know, that does computers first over oil, I guess, for this little bit of extra culture boost from the Manhattan Project. And then take military theory with all these techs in their hand also. This makes the science income extra valuable. I saved my impact of strength. Revealing refugees. Sadly, Delone Carter is able to win and not me, but at least I don't lose it. I'm going to decide this turn to go ahead and use that urban growth I took way past when on another lab. I definitely am not going to need a happy face building anytime soon, so I thought this was going to be the best use of that urban growth. And then I just take some rock yellow cards and then upgrade one of my knights to a tank in preparation for this mechanized army, and, you know, getting in preparation for my war. I draw 2 more tactics, and a second mechanized army, as well as a positional army that I'm now definitely not using since I just got tanks going. As well as a second war. Piata tries to, obviously failing spy against Piata, probably just didn't have anything better to do with their political phase. Decides to take a United Nations wonder as a source of culture, even though it's pretty expensive for them. Maybe they thought they didn't have anything better to do with the civil actions this turn, aside from playing this rev idea. Piata destroys a mine, now only has 1 mine, but thanks to these 2 wonders, is still on 6 resource income. is able to build 2 cannons and then place on a Napoleonic army tactic to now actually be strongest, and then take some military 3 for extra strength insurance as well as an efficient upgrade, probably for the scientific method. Jalen Carter sees reveals a Cold War. Unfortunately, I am not in on the Cold War. No, nice to me. Jalen Carter is able to upgrade 2 oils and then elect Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs definitely looks like an extremely strong leader in Jalen Carter's position with all this rock and science income. She gets a lot of culture off of Steve Jobs. Gets 8 culture off him this turn, in fact. It's my turn. I was not able to get a strong war going this turn, so instead I had to cede my impact of progress. I reveal my prosperity, which obviously gives me a lot of food. It lets me, after playing some yellow cards, I can build a rocket. I also take this reserves. Again, I need as many Roculas as I can get. This will give me 6 plus 8 is 14. So with these, I will have just enough rocks to build a second rocket and an air force next turn. That's giving me a mechanized army tactic with an air force, which was looking like the strongest war I could get. There's maybe a chance that the age could actually end before my next turn, but it seemed kind of likely. I mean, Pepikos and Piata both have the hands full, you know, so I thought that I should be able to get one more turn where I can declare war. Draw armed intervention. Loss of sovereignty and impact of colonies. Good impact. Pepikos tries offering a peace treaty to Dylan Carter. Kind of a, nice try, mine as well, but it was unsurprisingly rejected. Because decided to get some farm income going with this mechanized agriculture, and then elects Marie Curie, probably the best leader in their position, because they have no labs. So yeah, maybe they could have waited for Mandela, but I understand wanting Marie Curie now, and building a cannon. Piata seems revealing crime wave. Unfortunately, this hits me. Piata upgrades the scientific method, builds another theater. They needed it because of the happy face situation, is able to finally play the Republic, get out of despotism, and then take some yellow cards. Dylan Carter offers international tourism pact to Pecos, which is accepted. Decides to take Red Cross, plays Cavalryman, builds 3 stages of the Red Cross. Actually has the food for 1 more, but I guess they valued playing the Cavalryman this turn more. Which is the right choice, because the Cavalryman would have been lost at the end of the age otherwise. But we can see that indeed there is 1 more turn in age 3 for me, meaning that I am able to declare war. The choice of war was pretty obvious. Dylan Carter definitely will be able to defend a war. It looks they are very blatantly setting up for a modern army tactic. They'll give them a lot of strength. Piata actually has left themselves, thanks to the reserves, with just enough rocks and military actions to get 4 armies next turn if they have to, which I would not be able to get a successful war. Meaning that Pepikos, despite having Himeji Castle, is actually the only player I can get a successful war against this turn. So that's why I declared war against Pepikos. As I said, I can get a medieval army tactic plus an air force going, so this was all pretty strict, leaving me with 1 civil action left, and that choice is also obvious. Oh right, I was a bit stronger with the Napoleonic army tactic instead of the mechanized army, so I adapted that tactic. And with my last civil action, I built 1 stage of Dylan Carter's Red Cross. It felt like I did consider maybe taking Bill Gates or something, but there is still Mandela in the deck, heavy civil action cost, but still a leader that I can get, and I just felt that, I'm very close in culture with Dylan Carter right now, so I thought that this and Piata, so I thought that being able to nab for myself that 6 culture from Red Cross was going to be more culture in the end than taking Bill Gates would have. Bill Gates would have only represented 3 culture for me. So yeah, that's 3 more culture. And it's denying 6 culture from Payada, basically. Pubicaus offers peace treaty to Payada this time, who accepts. But it finishes the United Nations, despite me having declared war, but we can see that it's because they have the wave of nationalism that will pay for their army, revealing an impact of industry, unfortunately bad for me. And yeah, Pubicaus, after destroying 2 mines, is able to get a 3rd army going to get as strong as they can against my war. Payada sees, reveals a popularization of science. This at least is a decent event for me. Gets a 3rd army tactic going and takes pro sports, the last copy of Air Forces. Payada actually finishes the Red Cross. Because Pubicaus had to spend their food on getting population to defend against my war. Age 4 begins. Dylan Carter, unsurprisingly, declares a war against Pubicaus. They were clearly setting up for it last turn. As stated, they are able to get a modern army, 2 modern armies going, actually getting, despite not having air forces, they are at 11 more strength than I am, which is definitely impressive. Obviously, the military theory, and especially the Manhattan Project, help a lot with that. Actually, 74 with the arena, and then 77 with the satellites. So yeah, all of these extra non-military sources of strength end up adding up to 17, 22, 25. Yeah, so 77 strength, definitely a very high number to get to without air forces, especially. It's the last turn. Pubicaus sacrifices to Himeji Castle, so I can only end up winning 10 culture, so definitely a pretty mediocre war in the end, unfortunately. At least I have a good impact of colonies for myself, revealing my freedom of movement. I considered using the freedom of movement. I put it into religion to get the extra culture. I thought about getting rid of my farm, as I said, but actually if I got rid of this agriculture, then I would no longer have more production and consumption, meaning that would cost me a potential 4 to impact of agriculture. So I felt that losing the lab instead, would also cost me for some impacts, but less so than an impact of agriculture, which I felt was like Pubicaus in particular. I felt there was a pretty decent chance that Pubicaus would see it. Well, I think Pubicaus hasn't seen the impacts, but Dylan could also see it. Anyway, so yeah, aside from that, and I also considered moving my swordsman into religion, but the problem is that we'll see in Pubicaus' turn, but Pubicaus can actually get up to exactly 59 strength. And obviously I did the impact of strength. So even though I will not be able to get more strength than Dylan Carter, I thought that it was really important for me to be ahead of strength of Pubicaus. And so I could not afford to lose any of my strength sources for that reason, because Pubicaus can get up to 59, and so that's why I decided to move the alchemy into religion instead. Anyway, aside from that, the best way I can get extra culture is just to play Mandala. I don't really have enough resources or food to do anything else with my turn anyway. Well, aside from playing computers for potential impact of technology. Pubicaus, say after military build-up, they're able to get 1 more army going to get up to exactly 59 strength. Which is as much as they can get against this war. Payada plays a positional army tactic at the end of the hand, and the military theory to go up to 60 strength, though that's only temporarily, because then they disbanded knights in order to build a 3rd opera. Dylan Carter gets a 17-point war against Pubicaus. And they unfortunately also have an armed intervention they can play against me, sadly. And they just built some buildings. So before the final impacts, we can take a look at the situation. Despite Pubicaus suffering 2 wars, they're actually only 1 culture behind me. And Payada and Dylan Carter are way ahead of both of us. I ended up just not being able to get a good source of culture in Age 3. So Payada and Dylan Carter are going to be 1st and 2nd in some order, and me and Pubicaus are going to be 1st, 3rd, and 4th in some order. But, who's 1st and who's 3rd is very much still up in the air. So this impact phase is certainly going to be exciting. The first impact that's revealed is the impact of progress. This is a good impact for Piata and for me. Piata is now 15 points ahead of Dylan Carter, and I get more of a cushion against Pepicus. I am 7 points ahead of them. Next is impact of competition, though. This is a good impact for Dylan Carter, giving them 6 points against Piata. They are now only 9 points behind Piata. I am now 10 points ahead of Pepicus, though. Next is my impact of strength. This is a really good impact for Dylan Carter. Obviously, Dylan Carter is now actually ahead of Pepicus in culture. I am also even further ahead of... Dylan Carter is ahead of Piata in culture. I am even further ahead of Pepicus in culture. It's going to be very hard for Pepicus to catch up now, but Dylan Carter and Piata are both really close. Next is my impact of colonies. This also helps out me a lot, but also Dylan Carter a lot. Dylan Carter is now 7 points ahead of Piata. I am in a pretty dominant lead over Pepicus now. Next is an impact of science. This was probably seeded by Dylan Carter. This puts them even further ahead of Piata. They are now 12 points ahead of Piata. This gives me even more of a cushion against Pepicus. And there's one impact left. And this impact does not save Piata. In fact, it is another one that's good for Dylan Carter. And in the end, Dylan Carter is able to end up in first by a pretty substantial margin, too. In fact, even, like I said, first and second, third, and fourth are up to grabs before the impact phase. But after it, I think it's somewhat decisive. Dylan Carter wins by 17 points, and I end up over 40 ahead of Pepicus. I will say at the time, this game felt disappointing to me. I felt that I was doing well throughout ages 1 and 2, and then it kind of fell apart in age 3. But I will say, looking back, I can definitely see the mistakes that I made. I do think at several points in ages 1 and 2, I was pretty substantially civil action and efficient. And then on a strategic level, as I said previously, while I think that only live off of Bronze Age in my strategy can certainly work. I mean, with A440 has proven that it can work. I think that with me having won so many colonies and with me having to spend an H3 military tax, I was not in a situation where I could feasibly just live off of bronze mines. And it was because of that I was ultimately able to not get too much strength going and therefore not get a big war going. And without a big war and without me ever really getting much culture production going, I really didn't have much hope at all of finishing first in this game. Dylan Carter, though, I mean, we saw at the beginning of age 3, they had the lowest culture by far, but they were able to catch up way amount in age 3. I think Dylan Carter played a very strong age 3. They were able to get good oils going with Watt, and then replace it with Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs gave them a ton of culture, Red Cross gave them a ton of culture, the war gave them more culture, and in the end, they were able to get a relatively close, but still pretty decisive victory in this game. With Piata the favorite in the group coming in second, and me the second favorite in the group coming in third. So I think this was definitely a very well-played game by Dylan Carter, really showing how you can catch him in culture quickly in age 3 if you do it right. Piata, I think, just had a really strong Michelangelo game going, but in the end, I think Piata's economy wasn't quite strong enough to support enough of a military. Piata event was not able to war Pepicus. That war against Pepicus, that was 17, right? That's the difference. Yeah, that's the difference in this game. Yep. So Dylan Carter being able to war Pepicus and Piata not is what enabled Dylan Carter to win against Piata. Piata also wasn't able to get quite enough culture production going in order to match Dylan Carter's war, because they also had to prepare for a war themselves. I think Piata was also hit by strength events earlier. We can see, yeah, their economy ended up being pretty weak. So despite this very strong Michelangelo game, I think their economy wasn't quite strong enough to finish first, but second, still a good result, obviously. As for Pepicus, I think Pepicus just had way too much corruption throughout the game. Pepicus had, what, like 5 or 6 turns of corruption? I think it's honestly really, really hard to win a game when you have that much corruption. You just lose too much value, too many rocks for nothing, essentially. But yeah, as I said, I think while I had some tactical mistakes with civil action and efficiency and such, I think my overall strategic blunder was thinking that I could survive off of bronze mines, but not being in a situation I actually could. I think maybe if instead of taking Nobel, if I had taken Shakespeare, maybe I could have gotten good cultural production with Shakespeare while still at least having enough military not to be under threat of war, but I mean, we can see in the end, Dylan Carter was able to get a big war. So I think if I had gone for Shakespeare, I probably would have just been hit by a war from Dylan Carter and not won. So yeah, I think me picking Nobel wasn't the reason why I ended up in third, but it was my overall strategic game plan. So yeah, somewhat of a disappointing result for me, but obviously it's still just one game, still tons of Through the Ages left to play in this group. So in my next video, I will cover the second 4-player game, which I can say is one of the most unique games of Through the Ages I've ever played. So definitely stay tuned for that. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.